Salve and welcome to Parsing John. Today we are in chapter 1, verse 45. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the rubric, everything that we're looking for as we go through this text, and here is our Latin. Invenit Philippus Nathanael et dicit ei quem scripsit Moises in lege et prophetae invenimus Jesum filium Joseph a Nazareth. That's as far as we're going to go today. Very first thing that we find is invenit, our verb, which is very nice. Don't have to look for it. It is our ending. It's going to be a third person singular ending. This comes from invenio, invenere, invenii. So we can't tell what tense this is. It could be either present tense or it could be perfect tense. And it is, of course, active and indicative. It means find or found, depending on the tense. And here we have our subject, Philippus. We have us here, which is a nominative singular masculine. It just means, of course, Philip. And here we find Nathanael. And here we have something very interesting. We've got a diaeresis over this E here. And what that tells us is this AE is not a diphthong, but instead E is its own syllable. Hence me pronouncing it Nathanael rather than Nathanael. There we go. So this thing does not decline, so we can't actually tell what case it is or what function it is without context. As we take a look around it, we don't have anything beyond these three words in the sentence. We get et introducing a new clause with dicit as its verb. So the only thing that makes sense in this sentence is for there to be a direct object making Nathanael what we would normally want to be in the form of accusative, but indeclinable, sadly not. So this is just, and I don't know how to spell his name all of a sudden. This is a problem. I'm just going to spell it like that. And this we would mark as direct object. It, of course, means and. Dicit here we have it as our ending. That's going to be another third person singular. This is dico, dicere, dixi, so this makes it present tense. And active indicative. Says AE comes from is, id. This is our dative singular. It's the same form for all three genders, so we only know its form and its number. 2, and it's going to be Nathaniel as the referent of AE. I'm going to put him. And then we're going to enter direct discourse. We should put quote marks over here with quem. Quem is from qui quae quod. I'll put that up here. Qui quae quod. And then in order to check to make sure that that is correct, we would want to take a look at the word that appears right before it to make sure it's not si, nisi, num, or ne, or any of their variants. We've got a, so it's none of those. Had it been si, nisi, num, or ne, or any of their variants, then we would want to actually assume that this quem is actually alla quem. But we don't have it. It's just a normal qui quae quod, which then in turn means that we have a relative clause. And quem introduces the relative clause, and that means we need to find our main verb which appears outside the relative clause. But let's go ahead and parse it first. Em is from the masculine one. Qui, quis, qui, quem, quo. That's accusative, singular, masculine. What or which. Scripsit, right after that we've got it as our ending. Scribo, scribere, scripsi, so this is perfect tense, third person singular. Wrote. And then we find Moises. Moses here is a non-native Latin word, which means it doesn't decline normally. I think it is a third declension in Latin, which means a lot of different things, probably. But es here is going to be our nominative singular ending. If I'm correct about it being third declension, I will put a note at the bottom of the screen. Moses. So since we have scripsit here right after quem, scripted has to be the verb of the relative clause, which means our main verb is somewhere else. So we'll want to look ahead. We've got our subject or verb, and that in lege is a prepositional phrase. Lege is a ablative. Singular, and I believe law is feminine. Et, conjunction. This could be adding something to a prepositional phrase, but as we take a look at propheti is the wrong case. In fact, it can only be nominative, plural, or genitive or dative singular. Et can't connect scripsit, which is what it would be pulling as its first thing, with a dative or anything like that. So instead, et has to be connecting another subject with our verb. I know our verb is singular, but what our translator here, Jerome, is trying to get us to understand is that he wants the verb repeated. You don't always have to write the verb down every time again and again and again, just like in English. So this is nominative, plural, and it's masculine. So that's not a verb, of course. And then we find envenimos. Ending is mus, which is a first person plural. The same thing that we had earlier. Where did it go? Invenit. So we still can't tell the tense, so it's either present or perfect. It's active, still, and indicative. So it could be that this is the verb, second verb of our relative clause, but propheti being nominative plural with a first person plural doesn't make much sense, so we should probably assume that this is our main verb. And let's go back into our relative clause and go ahead and write the translations of these in law and with implied another wrote. So what Moses wrote in law and what prophets wrote. In venimus, we find or found. Jesum, you have here, which is accusative, singular, masculine. Filium, which is also accusative, singular, masculine, which then this means that filium, so you can look ahead, we don't have a linking verb, and of course that wouldn't work unless it were an infinitive. This has to be a predicate, just a renaming of Jesus, telling us what he is. And you've got Yosef a Nazareth. A is the only thing that is actually a Latin word here. It is a preposition. It's going to be taking Nazareth as its object because that's the last word in the sentence. And normally prepositions don't take the word before them unless you're in poetry, and this is not poetry. We're still in the direct discourse from Philip. It's going to take ablative, but Nazareth is indeclinable. From and now we have the problem of Joseph. Since Joseph is not a Latin word and it doesn't decline, we have no clear indication what it is. So our only solution then would be to go and look at the Greek, which I, of course, buried under various pages. Okay, let's take a look at here, the very end of the verse. I'm going to correct on verse 45. Jesus, son of the Joseph. So Joseph in Greek, at least, is genitive. So we should assume that that is the same thing intended here. Genitive of Joseph. And there we go. That's everything parsed. Let's go ahead and take a look at it in its own context. Philip finds, or found Nathanael and says to him, what Moses wrote in law and what the prophets wrote, remember that's implied over here, we find or we found Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth. End quote. So far, so good. Let's take a look at it in the greater context from verse 43. Till tomorrow, he wished or wanted to go out into Galilee, and he found or he finds Philip, and Jesus says to him, follow me. However, but Philip was from Bethsaida, state of Andrew and Peter. Philip finds or found Nathanael and says to him, what Moses wrote in law and prophets, we find or we found Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth. There we go. That's the end of verse 45. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope taking a look at this has been helpful for you, and I hope that you continue along with me. Wale.